The perfect beginning. It wasn't long before Jason began to suspect something was wrong. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the way he watched me more closely, the subtle tension that lingered between us. He started asking questions: where I was going, who I was with, why I was always so distant. One evening, I came home late from meeting Alex, and Jason was waiting for me. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he held up my phone, where I had stupidly forgotten to delete a string of messages from Alex. Who is he? Jason asked, his voice quiet but filled with hurt. In that moment, my heart shattered. The walls I had built around my double life came crashing down, and I was left standing in the wreckage of my own choices. I wanted to lie, to deny everything, but I couldn't. The truth was written all over my face. I'm so sorry, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I never meant for this to happen. Jason's face crumpled as the weight of my betrayal sank in. He didn't yell or scream, he simply stood there, broken, as the love we had built over the years crumbled in his hands. Our love story began in the most cliché way possible. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the leaves are painted in vibrant shades of red and orange, and the air is just cool enough for a scarf but not cold enough for a jacket. I was walking through the park, absorbed in my thoughts, when I collided with a stranger. Books went flying, coffee spilled, and there was that awkward silence where time seemed to freeze. I looked up, and there he was, Jason, with his soft smile and deep green eyes, looking every bit as startled as I felt. He laughed nervously, bending down to help me collect my things, apologizing profusely even though it was clearly my fault for not paying attention. "Let me make it up to you," he said, offering me a warm, comforting smile. "Can I buy you a new coffee?" That moment was the beginning of everything. Jason and I spent the next few hours walking through the park, talking about life, our favorite books, and the silly little quirks we both had. It was as though the world had stopped, and it was just the two of us, floating in this bubble of perfect connection. I felt like I had known him my entire life. From that day on, Jason and I were inseparable. He had this way of making me feel like the only woman in the world, always attentive, always kind. Every moment with him was effortless, filled with laughter, long conversations that lasted well into the night, and an undeniable chemistry that made me feel alive in ways I had never known before. We moved in together a year after meeting, and everything felt perfect. Our love was the kind you read about in romance novels, the kind that seemed unbreakable, filled with passion, warmth, and endless promises of forever. But as they say, nothing stays perfect forever. Part 2: The First Signs of Trouble. 2 years into our relationship, Jason and I found ourselves consumed by the realities of life. The excitement of new love slowly faded into the background, replaced by the grind of daily routines, work, bills, responsibilities. The long talks turned into brief exchanges, and the passionate nights became fewer and further between. It wasn't that we stopped loving each other, it was that we got too comfortable, too settled. I missed the Jason who would surprise me with flowers on a random Tuesday, the Jason who would pull me into his arms and dance with me in the kitchen. No music necessary, and though I didn't want to admit it, I was changing too. I was no longer the wide-eyed, love-struck girl who felt like she had found her soulmate. I had started to wonder if this was all there was, if the magic of the beginning was gone forever. It was during this time of emotional distance that I met Alex. Part 3: Meeting Alex. Alex worked at the same company as me, but in a different department. He was tall, confident, with an easy smile and a playful sense of humor that made everyone in the office gravitate toward him. I'd seen him around a few times but had never really spoken to him until one Friday afternoon when we both found ourselves waiting in line for coffee in the break room. He struck up a conversation, asking about my weekend plans, and before I knew it, we were laughing and joking as though we had been friends for years. Alex was charming in a way that felt effortless, and talking to him felt like a breath of fresh air, a reminder of the kind of lightness I used to feel with Jason, but hadn't felt in a long time. We began to bump into each other more often, at work events, in the hallways, and during lunch breaks, and slowly, without realizing it, I started looking forward to those moments. There was an ease in being around Alex that I hadn't felt in a while. He made me feel seen, appreciated, and for the first time in a long time, desired. Part 4. Crossing the line. It was after a company happy hour that things between Alex and me changed. We had both had a few drinks, and as the evening wound down, we found ourselves sitting outside the bar, talking about everything and nothing. He leaned in closer than usual, his eyes locking with mine, and for a brief moment, I forgot about Jason. I forgot about everything except the electricity in the air between Alex and me. I think about you more than I should, Alex confessed, his voice low, almost hesitant. My heart raced at his words, and though every rational part of me screamed that this was wrong, I didn't pull away when he leaned in and kissed me. It was a kiss filled with the kind of passion I hadn't felt in years, a kiss that made me feel like the old me, the girl who was full of life, full of excitement. In that moment, I gave in to the temptation, knowing full well that I was crossing a line I could never uncross. That kiss turned into something more, and before I knew it, I was entangled in a full-blown affair with Alex. We met in secret, stolen moments that made my heart race with excitement and guilt. I told myself it was just physical, just a temporary escape from the monotony of my relationship with Jason. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I was falling for Alex, and it scared me. Part 5. The Guilt and the Distance. As my relationship with Alex deepened, the distance between Jason and me grew even more. I started avoiding him, making excuses to stay late at work or go out with friends. I could see the hurt and confusion in his eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to face the reality of what I was doing. I didn't want to admit that I was the reason our relationship was falling apart. The guilt was suffocating. I still loved Jason, or at least, I loved the idea of who we used to be, but the passion I felt with Alex made me question everything. How could something that felt so right be so wrong? How could I betray the man who had been nothing but kind and loving to me? I began to withdraw from both Jason and Alex, caught in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't sort through. I was torn between the comfort of my long-term relationship and the thrill of something new, something dangerous, the discovery. The end of us. Then came that fateful day. It was a Friday evening, and I had planned a dinner date with Ryan. I told Mark I was working late. He had planned a surprise dinner for us, wanting to rekindle our romance. When he walked in on me and Ryan in our living room, I felt my world shatter. The look on Mark's face was one of utter disbelief and betrayal. I stood frozen, my heart racing as reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I could see the hurt in his eyes as he took in the scene. There were no words, just a deafening silence. Mark turned and walked out without saying a word, leaving me feeling hollow. Part 5. The immediate aftermath. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to reach out to Mark, but he refused to answer my calls. I felt a wave of panic wash over me as I realized the enormity of what I had done. I had not only betrayed my husband but shattered the life we built together. A week later, I received the divorce papers in the mail. My heart sank as I read the words that would change my life forever. I was devastated, but there was also a strange sense of relief. I had wanted to escape the monotony of my life, but I never imagined it would end this way. The divorce proceedings began. I moved out of our home and into a small apartment, filled with regrets and unanswered questions. I was alone for the first time in years, and the excitement of dating multiple men quickly faded. I was left with emptiness and a haunting sense of guilt. Part 6. The Weight of Regret. As I sat alone in my new apartment, the weight of my choices pressed heavily on my chest. I felt like a shell of my former self, and the reality of my actions hit me like a wave. I lost not only my husband but also my best friend. I thought about all the good times we had shared and realized how foolish I had been to throw it all away for a few fleeting moments of excitement. I began attending therapy to work through my feelings of guilt and shame. My therapist helped me confront my actions and the impact they had on my life and the lives of others. It was a painful process, but I needed to face the consequences of my choices. I started journaling to express my feelings. Writing became a form of therapy for me. I poured my heart onto the pages, detailing my thoughts, regrets, and longing for the life I once had. Through journaling, I began to understand the root of my actions. I was unhappy with my life, and instead of addressing those feelings, I sought validation in the wrong places. Part 7. Finding myself. As the months passed, I began to heal. I focused on rebuilding my life, concentrating on my career and personal growth. I took up new hobbies, like painting and yoga, to fill the void left by my broken marriage. I also made an effort to reconnect with old friends who had always supported me. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, where I discovered a new sense of purpose. Spending time with animals brought me joy and fulfillment I hadn't felt in a long time. I started to realize that my happiness didn't depend on someone else's attention. It was something I needed to cultivate within myself. Eventually, I decided to cut ties with my past relationships. I deactivated my dating app and focused on my own healing. I didn't want to seek validation from anyone else. I needed to learn to love myself first. Jason moved out the next day. The emptiness that filled our home was unbearable. I was left alone with my guilt, my regret, and the painful realization that I had destroyed the one thing I had once held most dear. My affair with Alex had seemed like an escape, but it had cost me everything. Eventually, the lies began to unravel. I found myself constantly on edge, fearing that I would slip up. Mark would occasionally ask if I was okay. Sensing that something was off, I would brush him off, assuring him that I was just stressed with work. I was living in constant fear, and it was exhausting. I tried reaching out to Jason, but he refused to speak to me. The divorce papers arrived a few weeks later, and I signed them with trembling hands. Our marriage was over, and it was entirely my fault. As for Alex, our relationship fizzled out soon after. The excitement of sneaking around disappeared once the reality of what I had done set in. I was left with nothing but the pieces of my broken life, trying to figure out where I had gone so wrong. Part 8. Picking up the pieces. Months passed, and I threw myself into work, trying to forget the pain of my failed marriage. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the guilt that weighed on me like a heavy blanket. I had hurt the one person who had loved me unconditionally, and I didn't know if I would ever forgive myself. I started going to therapy, hoping to make sense of my choices and the emptiness that had driven me to betray Jason. Slowly, I began to understand that the affair hadn't been about Alex or the excitement he brought into my life. It had been about me, about my fears, my insecurities, and my inability to communicate what I truly needed in my relationship with Jason. Therapy helped me confront the parts of myself I had been running from, the fear of vulnerability, the fear of being unloved. It was a long, painful process, but it was necessary. Part 9. Finding closure. One evening, nearly a year after our divorce, I ran into Jason at a coffee shop. My heart raced as I saw him standing there, looking as handsome and kind as ever. He noticed me, too, and for a moment, we simply stood there, the weight of our shared history hanging in the air. We ended up sitting down together, talking for the first time since the divorce. It was awkward at first, but eventually, the conversation flowed more easily. I apologized again, sincerely this time, for everything I had done. To my surprise, Jason didn't hold any anger or bitterness toward me. He had moved on, found peace, and even started dating someone new. Hearing that hurt, but I was happy for him. He deserved someone who could love him fully, without the doubts and fears that had clouded our relationship. As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of closure. Jason had forgiven me, And maybe, just maybe, I could start to forgive myself.